Welcome to Charts Today. My name's David Linton, and today's edition for Thursday, the 18th of April, comes to you from London. And it's been a busy couple of weeks for me. This is my first Charts Today this week. I spoke to the STA last week on the price targets and how they work. If you haven't watched that video, there's some good information there. And then this week we had the Technicals to Trading Systems Conference, which I was also speaking at, and that was a brilliant event on Tuesday. So keep an eye out for videos on that one as well. And then I've been busy with Trevor Neal at Beta Group. Of course, I'm now working with Trevor. We've got our first training course week after next, 2 training courses in London, and a lot of preparation for that. It's going to be just a handful of people, hand-picked delegates. It's just going to be a very one-to-one tuition on technical analysis. So it's going to be great. So keep an eye out for that. Now, today I'm going to cover currencies. Then we'll look at stocks and some of the commodities. And then last of all, we will take a look at the energy mix, and we'll spend quite a bit of time there because that's been just fascinating watching the moves there each day. And of course, I produce the energy reports to clients every morning, so I'm watching the energy markets very closely indeed. So we start by looking at the euro. Of course, the news is very much about what the Fed's going to do next. Looks like, interest rates in the US are going to stay higher for longer, and that's meaning that we're seeing euro weakness there. We've got a downside target. We've got even a new one if we make new lows below parity. So that's going to be really very interesting indeed. So this is on the daily chart, medium term. The short term chart, we are seeing just a little bit of a recovery off the bottom around 106. We look at sterling. Sterling sitting a little bit flatter against the dollar. We've got mixed targets here. No big surprises with that because currencies generally don't trend over the long term as much. You'll get the sort of movement between them. And so we're seeing here upside targets to the upside on the medium term, waiting to see if we activate this downside target. And short term, we do have a downside target there. So that's quite key as well. Bitcoin, that's really hit the buffers lately. We saw this massive move up. And now we're in this sort of huge consolidation pattern between the sort of 60,000, 74,000 level. Downside targets on the short-term chart, so there's no ignoring those. So that's quite key. The Nasdaq 100, we're seeing here, we are below the cloud there now on the 60-minute chart with a downside target. Again, market's starting to run out of steam a little bit, and if we look at the S&P future, we've had these downside targets here, and they are really now starting to show through. This upside target, we're wandering away from it. That's what we call exhaustion, where this target is starting to look like we might have to go lower. And of course, if we go back to below 47.50, we deactivate that target. So really quite key to watch that. You want to understand the targets, just message me and I'll happily provide you with videos that explain them in much more depth. So not looking great. The future's up slightly this morning. If we look at the FTSE future, we have seen how we're heading to that downside target there on the 60-minute chart. It's interesting, this upside target, downside target, and the shorter term playing out. We look at that a lot when we're looking at these different time frames. And if we look at the DAX in Germany, that has also been really heading towards this new downside target there. So we see that activated as well, wandering away from the upside target. This is one of the beauties of the targets, is just seeing the trajectory and then seeing how we're wandering away from that trajectory. So it's really quite key that. Very interesting indeed. If we look at some of the other markets, we see China. This has been really interesting, really recovering off that bottom there. New upside target, some better news coming out of China. And we're seeing here upside targets being met. Having been in a downtrend, we're now starting to see a new trend. India still looking strong on that medium term with those targets in place, and the Aussie market, that's been pretty interesting. Downside target there given and met nearly, so you really can't ignore that. An upside target that was given and met as well. So keep an eye on those shorter term charts if you're trading Oz. We'll look at the energy mix in a minute, but just looking at some of the commodities, soft commodities, we've got cocoa, that's sitting between 10 and 11,000. What a run that has been. Watch the shorter term targets though, that's going to be quite key. Look at coffee, and we see here how the target again on the short-term chart for coffee is in place. Notice how these targets were met, so really quite key there. I know some of our users are using the targets to trade coffee, so really quite key to watch there. Wheat's another one that's been pretty interesting. Downside targets on the short term, but we have got this new upside target. We are still below the cloud though, so you just got to bear that in mind. If we take a look at gold, we see here how that upside target was met. We've still got really big targets for gold in the long run, 36.70, but that is into 2026. So don't get thinking that that's going to happen straight away. Silver, again, we've got some very big upside targets long term for silver, but watch the short term just playing out there for the moment. And US 10-year yields, that's been really quite a big story with these short-term upside targets. We're just starting to wander away from those targets, but notice how on the daily chart the trend tracks are there. And of course, we've got the very long-term target, which is very scary. Apple, talked about Apple last night. Apple heading to this downside target on the daily. The 60-minute target has been met. Really quite key there. If we look at some of the other charts, Nvidia, of course, that's the one that everyone's been watching. New downside targets emerging off the top there, so really quite interesting. Is that game over for Nvidia? And then Tesla, this has been a really clear picture, downside targets all the way. So that's been happening all on the Now the interesting thing is this morning our poll result was out. As we've seen European energy markets turning, we've seen more and more people becoming bullish. So saying it's a bottom, 27% 5 weeks ago, 38% of people felt we'd bottomed just a week ago, and now it's 43%. So the sentiment is changing. Notice how the sentiment lags the chart. Really quite interesting there indeed. But I'm still amazed that people still believe that we're going to unwind this move and we're going to go lower still in 2024. Quite incredible that the market still believes that. Looking at the just the oil price here, we see Brent downside targets met there on the 60-minute chart. Coal, we take a look at. Really big upside target here for coal. That's really quite key. And the short-term targets. So coal is really looking pretty strong, to be honest. And then if we look at some of the other markets, carbon, this has been really fascinating just watching these moves. Target given met, target given met, another target not yet quite met. Just really hit the buffers. Note these round levels on carbon. So we found 55, 60, 70 we got through, 75 come back to test 70, 80's next, then 85. You can't ignore the round levels. That's really quite key. We've got this downside target on the 60-minute, but if you're trading carbon, you want to be looking at these shorter term charts. There's the 1 minute coming off the bottom this morning, new targets to the upside there, and if you're looking at the 10-minute, it just gives you a slightly different view. So it's pretty choppy at the moment because we're pulling back off that move to the high. Taking a look at TTF Dutch gas, again the targets in place. Upside targets, not yet through the cloud, but we can't ignore the fact that we've got upside targets creeping in. The downside targets were met, previous upside targets met. We've got this new downside target. Do not be surprised to see the downside target not being fulfilled because we're in an uptrend. So you will not quite often reach the target in an uptrend to the downside. Equally, on an uptrend, you quite often exceed the upside targets. So don't be surprised to see that either. See a new target kicking in there this morning, and on the 10-minute chart, bit of a mixed picture. So you'll just watch those targets and really notice how I move around the time frames there. I know more and more people here are using the targets, so I'm really happy to share this with you and how you're best to use them. German power. Upside targets given, just hit some cloud resistance there on the lagging line, nearly met on those targets to 100 euros. That's a magnet, really. And then after that, 120 and 140. Because we just fell quite sharply, the resistance levels 100, 120, 140. But at the moment, this is where we're headed to that 100 target. Downside on the 60-minute, that's what we're playing for. And again, you want to look at the 10-minute chart. This is on EEX. If you're using your OTC data on TradeWalk, then you can run these targets as well, of course, and more people are doing that. So that's it for today. Until next week, happy charting. Bye for now.